So Morgan Stanley actually came about in 1997 when Dean Witter acquired Morgan Stanley. Ironically, Morgan Stanley was Dean Witter's advisor when Dean Witter went public in 93.
Really?
Dean Witter became the acquirer of Morgan Stanley. Even though
do you remember that process?
Well, I remember you're taking a very traditional retail firm whose roots were San Francisco going back to the 1920s. Dean Witter is a real person. That was the founder of the firm. And merging with, in effect, a white shoe boutique investment bank. Very different businesses.
Right.
And then you had kind of triangulated in Discover Card, a credit card operation.
Which was not a little business.
Which was no longer a little business. It was competing head-to-head with Visa and MasterCard at that time, and had carved out their market share accordingly, and was a very profitable division. So you had a interesting mix that the street had never seen before in terms of putting together an investment bank with a retail brokerage house that happened to own a credit card operation. And to say that created, kind of some cultural dynamics would be an understatement. I mean, just very different business models at the time.
Who did you report to, and what was your mandate in dealing with that, combination of different forces that were coming together?
Yeah, well, I continued to report to pretty much a traditional Dean Witter management team up to the CEO, and Phil Purcell became the chairman of the combined entity. And Phil was chairman of Dean Witter.
So he became chairman of the combined entity.
The whole combined entity.
Who was the head of Morgan Stanley at the time?
John Mack.
Yes.
Right.
We'll talk about him. He stayed on a little bit?
A little bit, but I think he was probably not happy with the pace of any kind of succession plan of Phil leaving. And so John ended up leaving for a period of time. I think he ran Pequot for a while. And
so
then
at
came
that
back.
time, we were selling research to you.
Yeah, we started to use your research for managing some of our concentrated positions. We had a lot of founders of public companies, and by no coincidence, their largest stock position were in their companies, and that creates some interesting dynamics in terms of restricted stock, trading windows, and you really had to be mindful of how much debt was on that position, not only with your borrower, but also across the street, and manage that proactively. So we used a lot of your research to actually look at volatility and cycles.
And it was helpful.
It was very helpful. It actually made us raise maintenance requirements on certain concentrated positions along the way.
You used to tell me all the time, you don't get too many Christmas cards from the brokers
Never
asking for a margin loan on a stock we would say is topping. You just say, guys, I'm not giving you a margin loan.
Either not giving it or putting such a haircut on it that it was restrictive on how much they could borrow on it. That created for quite a few interesting conversations.
We spent a lot of time. We used to send a whole list of stocks. We would give you that, and you obviously acted on it.
We did, absolutely.
Again, unpaid for your savings, right? That was part of your job.
That was part of the job description.
So you were paying us quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
Morgan Stanley was paying us from London quite a bit of money, and a money manager at Morgan Stanley that lives in the Far East was running money. So we had 3 different clients at Morgan Stanley, all with different agendas.
Sure.
You were trying to make sure the margin loan was being made in a stock that wasn't topping.
Right.
The man in the Far East was trying to decide what 6 stocks to buy low. And London was doing a kind of a combination of the two because they had their whole training. And then John Mack walks in, and it was a fairly substantial combined amount of money at that time, and just puts out an edict, no outside research.
I think he put the kibosh on that immediately.
Well, not just us, but probably everything.
No, I think everything,
And so even though it looked like it saved them money, the reality is we were saving so much money in all 3 areas, but they didn't understand how to see it.
Yeah, it's almost like an opportunity cost, right? You don't actually realize you're avoiding some losses or mitigating risk because you didn't lose money by taking certain actions. So it's sort of an odd way to look at managing risk. It's the risk you avoid, right?
Oh,
it's almost like the reason you get insurance on your home is not because you expect it to burn down, but if it does burn down, you're covered for that.
And there's just no maybe now there is, I don't know. There was no consciousness of this then.
No.
and I don't know what it's like now. But so anyway, so we were doing that, and then you stayed and you created 4 businesses.
Well, the first one was the margin business.
Yeah.
I mean, the mortgage business. So the second one, then I was asked to start a commercial lending group for small and middle market businesses across the country.
Right.
And that would provide a combination of cash management services, lending services, and business advisory services. So
kind of like what you were doing at Summit?
Actually, more involved. The lending, for sure, what I was doing at Summit, but the cash management and the business advisory were new, so we hired people for each of those areas. And it was, again, to go back through our sales force of financial advisors across the country and say, let's tap into their local business contacts and see, what kind of business we can develop.
You ran this business.
I started the business.
And were you given a budget on like the first thing you had to do?
Actually, this one I did have a budget for and actually got some head count for.
Really?
And
no bonus. I'm just talking like at least you didn't have to play with one arm behind your back like
no, but
did, right?
What's interesting about that, we built that business plan, the strategic plan out probably right late 90s, around the turn of the century, going into 2000.
Yeah.
We were replicating Merrill Lynch's program. Merrill had been at this since the mid-80s. They had done a huge, great job.
Yeah.
So I did what any normal person would do. I went out and hired Merrill Lynch people who had
Yes.
already built it.
Yeah, I have actually friends, one of whom I'm speaking, I'm not going to mention his name, who was one of those guys actually.
Yeah, and I basically said, look, if you had to build it again, what would you do differently?
Yeah.
And people always have ideas on how they would do it better without repeating
So that was
mistakes.
another example of you, basically, I use a basketball analogy, standing at the top of the key, thinking, okay, last time I drove right, but this time why don't I drive left and bring some different players on?
Players in, yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And
And
you
they
brought-
had done it successfully.
And
so
you brought
why
a
not?
bunch of ex-Merrill guys?
We did,
Really?
yeah, we did. So that was right after 2000.
Wow.
And, but who knew, leading up to the events of 9/11,
Yeah.
that lots of business would come to a screeching halt because of the terrorist attacks.